The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Modified stage 2 for some, still stage 3 for others. Both still mean trouble for our economic situation. Tonight, what will it take, once the pandemic is under control, to grow out of the deep economic hole we're in? Then, the inimitable Jann Arden has a new book out, and she joins us on life, family, and the wonders of growing older. Yes, wonders, in a good way. It's Monday, October 26th, and that's next on The Agenda. Yes, the numbers are going up, and yes, we're in the midst of the second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic in Ontario, and yes, the economy is still in pretty desperate condition. But someday this will all be behind us. We'll have a vaccine, businesses will reopen. The question then becomes, how do we grow this wounded economy to create new jobs and lower our stratospheric deficits? We have 4 guests who spend an inordinate amount of time thinking about just that. And so we introduce them, as is our custom here on The Agenda, from furthest away to closest to our studio, starting in Vancouver, British Columbia, with Jim Stanford. He's the economist and director of the Centre for Future Work. And 3 guests in the nation's capital. In downtown, Trevin Stratton, chief economist and vice president at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. In the Glebe, Pamela Cross, lawyer and tax partner with the firm BLG, Borden Ladner Gervais. And in Nepean, Ontario, economist Armin Yalnizyan, Atkinson Fellow on the Future of Workers. And it's great to have you 4 on our program tonight. Here is the problem that we have invited you 4 in to fix. Are you ready? Sheldon, bring up this graphic and let's explain what's up here. We have just undertaken the largest annual decline in economic output on record. We've lost 1.2 million jobs between February and May of 2020. The Ontario budget deficit of $37.2 billion is what's projected for the year 2020-2021. The economy is expected to grow 5.1% in Ontario next year, but it fell 6.8% this year, obviously a mismatch. And even with an economic rebound, Ontario is still expected to be off by more than 300,000 jobs. All of those numbers courtesy of a new study that just came out from the Financial Accountability Office of Ontario, which has done a lot of good work looking into the economic ramifications of this pandemic. Okay, we are going to break up our discussion essentially into 3 different parts. Do we need spending increases or spending cuts going forward? What do we want to do about taxation policy? And give me any other bright ideas you might have. So those are essentially the 3 areas of investigation. And I want to start, Jim, start us off on this. Let's see if we can agree on what the mission ought to be here. I would assume that job 1 is to get the 300,000 plus people in Ontario who lost their jobs back into the workforce. And I assume that all of the policy prescriptions I'm going to hear from you 4 are going to be aimed to doing just that. But maybe I'm wrong in that assumption. So you tell me, what's job 1 in this pandemic?
I hate to be predictable, Steve, but you're 100% right. Job 1 is getting those jobs back, no doubt about it. This huge deficit, and huge is the only word you can use, that Ontario faces is absolutely the result of the decline in the economy, the lost revenues, the lost jobs, and of course the increased spending to try to fight COVID, prevent infection, and also support some of the households through this terrible time. So the solution is clear. We're going to have to ride out this catastrophe. The government is going to absolutely have to maintain its spending and probably increase it, frankly, in at least the medium term. And then as the economy reconstructs and we put people back to work paying taxes instead of collecting CERB and some of the other income supports that we put in place, that deficit will naturally come down. The key tightrope the government's walking now is that it cannot derail the recovery in jobs by obsessing about debts and deficit. I think that's one of the major risks we face right now.
Trevin, post-pandemic, what's going to be job 1?
Well, I mean, number one right now is obviously getting the pandemic under control, and that certainly needs to be the priority. There won't even be an economic recovery until we're able to do this. But when it comes to the economy itself, I agree with Jim. Our priority needs to be getting Canadians back to work. Canadians cannot return to their normal lives until they're gainfully employed. And it's clear right now with the second wave in certain parts of this country that we're in what a lot of economists like us are calling a K-shaped recovery, where some sectors, the ones that almost require physical presence for their business models to work, have shut operations once again, and they're going to be some of the hardest hit sectors. At the same time, there are other sectors of the economy that have started to recover and are near where they were pre-pandemic. And so despite a lot of the support provided to Canadians and businesses during this time period, at the end of the day, it won't be governments that create jobs, it's businesses that do. And so those sectors that are at the top side of the K, we need to be able to put in place the policies that will stimulate investment and growth for the economy to create those jobs. You know, just as in every downturn, it's first felt on Main Street when the lights begin to go out, and every recovery is going to start when the open signs begin to reopen.
And we'll talk about some of those specifics as we go forward. Okay, Armin, take us to post-pandemic. We've got the thing under control. Now we have to figure out what's job one. What do you say it is?
It's so difficult to put my mind there right now, Steve, because we're looking at an unpredictable amount of economic devastation. Some of the businesses on Main Street that Trevin was talking about will not survive. And the longer the pandemic goes on, the more will not survive. And in smaller towns, that's going to reshape Main Street far more than anything that public policy can do. So getting people back into jobs is not an easy thing. I think in the immediate interim, I'm not sure that this is the government to do it, but I think in the interim, getting the work done that we need, which involves rebuilding physical and social infrastructure to be able to maintain purchasing power and get the stuff done that we need done, because on the other side of COVID is population aging and a tightening labor market, notwithstanding technological changes. So I think we need to get used to the idea of governments doing more than they have in the last 40 years going forward. And a lot of governments have an allergy to thinking that way.
Now, when you say I'm not sure that this is the government to do that, are you talking about the Ontario or federal government?
Yeah, no, the Ontario government. I think we're talking about the Ontario economy. So I was thinking about what can the Ontario government do? Of course, the appropriate level of carrying debt and deficit is at the federal level. So I think it's entirely appropriate that there have been several provinces getting together and saying that the feds have to do more on a lot of different fronts. And I think that's exactly the right way to finance the future of the work that we need done, which will be more through the public sector than we're used to.
Okay, Pamela?
If we do it right.
If we do it right. Pamela Cross, job one is what?
I agree that job one is getting people back to work, but I think that we have to appreciate that we are in a global environment, and we really do need to make sure that Canada's systems are competitive, because our borders are very porous. They're porous in terms of capital inflows, and they're porous in terms of our labor force. And I think that the pandemic has actually accelerated some of the changes that were probably coming down the road in any event, but we really do need to make sure that the responses here enable our businesses to actually grow and succeed in a very, very competitive global market. And that is something I think that will challenge all levels of government as they try to retreat from some of the supports that they've put in place and have that filled by the private sector. I really do think we have to keep our eye on what's happening globally.
Okay, Jim, I'm going to put you in the Premier's office, let's say about a year from now, when presumably we have a vaccine, people are taking it, there's more confidence that people are going back to work, and you've got his ear to give him some advice on the following. Premier, the deficit's through the roof, you're going to have to cut spending, or Premier, the deficit may be through the roof, but you can't stop spending. What's the advice?
Oh, certainly a year from now, even if we had the vaccine tomorrow, Steve, my advice would be the same. You cannot stop spending. The private sector does create jobs, as Trevin says, but where I disagree with Trevin is the idea that the government doesn't create jobs. That's absolutely wrong. The government creates a lot of jobs. In fact, the share of jobs in the economy that is going to be attributed to public services, public infrastructure investment. Direct public sector hiring is going to grow, not just during the pandemic, but for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years. Experience shows that when you've had a shock like the one that we're going through, the private sector does not just snap back magically. Consumer confidence is damaged, incomes are damaged, business investment is down, many businesses aren't surviving. And this is where you absolutely do need government to get the ball rolling in terms of the normal macroeconomic momentum that contributes to job creation and income growth and rising tax revenue. So I think economists around the world, including, surprisingly, the IMF and the World Bank last weekend at their annual meetings, said governments do not stop spending. In fact, increase spending. If you get infatuated with trying to reduce the deficit, we'll take what was a short-term supply shock from the pandemic and we'll convert it into a years-long depression. That's the risk that we face. So my advice today and next year will definitely be, Premier, you have to increase spending on childcare, on healthcare, on schools, on physical infrastructure to get the economy, get it some positive momentum once again.
Armin, I'm going to assume that you're in the same meeting with the Premier as Jim is. And when the Premier comes back at you and says, I've got a deficit that's almost near $38 billion, and I just can't keep borrowing that much money year after year after year, what are you going to tell him?
I'm going to say that what you've been doing thus far, Premier, and asking for assistance from the federal level is absolutely appropriate. Look, we are going to be facing a tsunami of debt because of COVID. Businesses are going to shutter. Households are poised to either not be able to pay their mortgages or not be able to pay their rents. You do not want the debt to balloon on the shoulders of those least able to afford it and who are paying the highest cost for that debt. We want, as far as the ecosystem of debt goes, to actually shift the risk onto the shoulders that are the broadest, and that is going to be the federal level. So I think getting the federal government to be an equal partner in more of the spending, the deficit spending, is the route to go. I think this is not a great time to raise taxes. It might be the right time to close off certain tax loopholes.
Hold off on that, Armin. We're going to get to taxation in a second. So, okay, you and Jim have had your meeting with the Premier and the Finance Minister, presumably, among others. And as you leave the Premier's office, you notice waiting anxiously to get in there for their time are Trevin and Pamela. So you all look at each other with a bit of a leery glance, and Trevin and Pamela go into the Premier's office, sit down. And Trevin, what are you going to tell the Premier of Ontario and his Finance Minister about what they ought to do on spending next year?
So governments have a very important role to play in economic recovery, but putting Canadians on the government payroll is not necessarily an economic recovery plan in and of itself. And I think a lot of the debate around debt and deficits is, it's almost a false choice. You know, people frame it as either you're for austerity or because interest rates are low, you're for just unlimited spending. And it almost ignores the really important questions, which is not whether we should be spending. I know very few people that are calling for austerity right now. It's how much can and should we be spending, and what should we be spending it on? And these are very important questions, considering the deficit that we've racked up so far. There was an IMF study that came out earlier this week, and Canada has the distinction of running the largest deficit amongst all countries at almost 20% of GDP. And so this is going to have a huge impact on Canada and Canadians. And so we have to think about, well, are we spending the right amount? Not necessarily is spending itself important, but also what we're spending it on, right? There was a report from RBC earlier this week as well, saying that in the second quarter of this year, the amount of transfers that went to households surged by a whopping $56 billion versus $23 billion. That was a decline in earned wages and salaries. And so, that $30+ billion difference is money that could be spent on other aspects of economic recovery, whether it's childcare, whether it's infrastructure. And so these are the real important questions that we need to be asking.
So you say that, and then Pamela, the Finance Minister, comes back at you and says, okay, give me some advice here. What do I do about taxation? Do I leave them the way they are? Do I raise them? Do I cut them? Which ones do I raise? Which ones do I cut? Pamela, help me here. What do I do?
Well, we have a tax system that was last overhauled 50 years ago and could have done with an overhaul prior to this. I think that one of the things that our tax system currently faces is, as a challenge, is the fact that it is overly complicated. And although I agree that, certainly there's always been tinkering with loopholes in the tax system, I think that we are faced with a situation where we very quickly need to address some fundamental issues with the way our tax system works and the way it taxes certain types of activities in the business community. For example, digital taxation is something we are really lagging behind on. And as we can see with our current remote working, businesses are adapting and will be much more digital in their approach to their own businesses. We need to make sure our tax system can adapt to something like that. There are many, many situations where the tax system is just too complicated. I do think that the tax system has to simplify itself and align itself with not just today's economy, but the economy we're going to face as we come out of this challenge. And I do think there's a lot of work to be done to get us there. The other speakers, rightly so, have said we have a lot of investments we have to make, whether it's in healthcare or other important social policy issues. Those are funded in large part through the tax system. And we need to make sure that our tax system is competitive and will produce high-paying jobs and strong businesses and support capital investment so that our private sector can help fund the challenges that we're going to have to pay for.
To which, Pamela, the Premier would say, okay, I know I need a competitive tax system, but get specific with me. What taxes do I need to lower? Which ones can I raise?
I think I would look at this in a staged approach. In the immediate, shorter term, there are a few things. There are some low-hanging fruit that really could be looked at. And the very first thing I'd say wouldn't even require a legislative amendment. We need our tax authorities to be much more attuned to the needs of our taxpayers. And when they're conducting audits, when they're engaging with taxpayers, there's been a lot written about how poorly our tax authority actually deals with taxpayers. The Auditor General commented on the fact you can't even get a phone call answered. We need to get a lot of that out of the system. And then we need to bring in some low-hanging fruit. We could look at some of the solutions that other countries have considered on the short term. Things like providing some relief on consumption taxes to improve consumer spending. I don't agree we should be raising taxes. I think this is not something that most taxpayers would be aligned with at this point in time. But I do think that there are some areas, digital taxation, potentially consumption taxes, where we could try to give a holiday on consumption taxes to encourage consumer spending. There are some short-term wins that could potentially shore up the economy in a different way.
Trevin, after Pamela finishes her answer, the executive assistant to the Premier interrupts the meeting by saying, oh, guess what? I've got Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland on hold. Can I put them on speakerphone and maybe you could offer them some advice, Trevin, while we're at it? What would you tell them to do on taxation?
Well, I mean, in the largest economic downturn in almost a century, I think it's important that we use all of the policy tools at our disposal, and tax policy is a very important tool that we can use for economic recovery. And in fact, it's already been helpful to people, right, in terms of small businesses and tax deferrals that have taken place already during the first wave of the pandemic. And as our economy continues to operate below capacity, there are a lot of really short-term things that we can do with our tax system that would help Canadians and help businesses, right? What about automating filing for simple tax returns, right? If you are a low-income single mother with 2 children, you can lose as much as $13,000 if you don't file a tax return or renew your eligibility for the Canada Child Benefit. And so this is money that's already in the system that you can be able to use, right? Enhancing the deduction for childcare expenses, as was mentioned by Pam, a temporary HST holiday, as has been done in a number of other countries in Europe as well. We have also seen changes taking place in the economy right now that will require changes to our tax tax system, like with individual Canadians working from home. And there's a form, a T2200, that you have to fill out. If all the Canadians that are working from home fill this out, it's going to be 20 million pieces of paper that are going to have to be filed at CRA. Why not just have that as a box that you can check in your actual filing and in your tax return itself? And then there are other aspects too. I think a lot of us agree that taxes shouldn't be going up in the middle of a pandemic. There is an escalator tax that's scheduled to go up on alcohol in April too. And why not put a pause on things like this until we're out of this? There are really short-term things that we can do, but then absolutely over the longer term, we haven't, done a comprehensive review of our tax system in over half a century. A number of other countries have, like the UK, like New Zealand, that has resulted in economic growth in them doing so. And it's looking at how to adjust the tax mix to be able to make our economy more competitive and attract investment and create jobs at the end of the day.
Okay, the Premier's executive assistant walks in and says, "You two out." I want to hear from the other two right now. Jim and Armin walk back in. The Prime Minister and the Finance Minister federally are on the speakerphone as well. And they all ask, Jim, what do we do on taxes? Do we raise them? If we do, which ones?
I really want to be at this meeting, Steve. I'm loving this whole scenario of having all the decision makers right in front of me at the same time. Thank you. I don't disagree, frankly, with some of the things that Trevin and Pamela have suggested. Tax simplification. Steve, I lived in Australia for a couple of years. It took me 15 minutes to do my income tax down there, all in an online form. And it takes me about 5 hours to do it here in Canada. And there's no reason why we couldn't simplify some of those things, for sure. But frankly, I think the importance of the tax system, both the level of tax and the design of it, is vastly overestimated, typically by people who are trying to get government to do something for them. A vested interest of some kind of tax break or loophole, or in the name of competitiveness, a rate reduction that will benefit them. But to look at it from the economy-wide perspective, taxes are not our problem. I wouldn't be in favor of trying to increase tax revenues in this moment. I do not accept the idea that taxes have to go up, even on the wealthy, to pay for this pandemic. The government can pay for this pandemic right now with no changes in its taxes. And the crucial challenge is spending, aggregate demand, and job creation. And tax reforms and tax cuts have very, very weak impacts, particularly in the short run. It's like pushing on a string to give someone a consumption tax holiday or some other kind of tax break right now, when people are fearful of what's coming down the world around the corner, and they're going to hang on to that money. So, by all means, let's go ahead and explore ways to make our tax system efficient and a bit fairer. Make sure that it's collecting enough money to pay for those long-run social programs that we need. But don't think that taxes are somehow going to fix this problem. We need something very much more direct and powerful to fix this problem.
Armin, almost in unison, Chrystia Freeland and Rod Phillips, the federal and provincial finance ministers, say, what taxes should I raise, Armin? If the deficit's too big and we need more revenue, what should we do?
So this is a very different question coming from the province of Ontario and the province of and the government of Canada. And I would echo, obviously, because we're in the same room together, my colleague, Jim Stanford, that taxes are not your problem. Your problem is purchasing power. And there are things that you can be doing at the federal level that do not require you to raise taxes. And I go to Trevin's point. It's not how much we spend, but how we spend it. What are we spending money on? What is the return on the investment for the dollars? Instead of focusing on the deficit or the debt, we should be focusing on how we can maximize potential in the GDP, both in terms of short-term and long-term. So we would hopefully have both levels of government looking at what are we spending on. Trevin mentioned early childhood education, early learning and childhood education. We will reap what we are sowing right now for the coming decades. And by the way, population aging is something we're not going to duck. 1 in 4 Canadians is going to be over the age of 65. This is going to last for decades. And we've got fewer and fewer people coming into the labor market. We're going to need all hands on deck. What are we doing about it? Zip. Nothing. We've been seeing the slow-moving demographic train coming at us for decades, and our solution is bring in more newcomers, bring in more temporary foreign workers. We've got to do better by our own people. So the issue, as Jim has said, is not the taxation side. It's the spending side. And if you spend properly, what you do is increase revenues because you've got more people working and you've got more people capable of learning and earning. So we already have a sight line on how to get that happening. If you fetishize that it's only private sector businesses that are going to bring the jobs back, you're not going to get that purchasing power in place in time. And so I would just go back to saying, just underscoring, taxes are important, not now, dear, later.
And Jim, when the federal finance minister comes back and says, okay, you want me to give an HST holiday to everybody, or, you know, on some things, on some products, or for a period of time, and that's going to balloon my deficit even more, what are you going to say to allay her fears?
Oh, I wouldn't support an HST holiday, not remotely. I think that would be an enormous waste of money. I would take the same amount of money and strengthen some of the investments that are already being made. Childcare, for example, there's a consensus now that childcare is an economic no-brainer. You get the immediate job creation effects from expanding childcare centers and building them. You get the benefits for women's labor force participation. Women have borne the brunt of particularly the double burden of trying to care for kids at home while trying to do their jobs at home. And then you get the long run benefits from kids who go through high quality childcare and have more capacity to earn money down the road. So that's the kind of thing I would use the resources to roll out as quickly as possible and not worry about this idea that we can somehow snap the economy back to life with a bit of tax.
Okay, we've got just a few minutes left here, and the Premier has decided that he wants all four of you in his office all at once for one last bright idea. So with a few minutes left, let me give 30, 40 seconds to each one of you, the Premier says. Give me one other bright idea that we should do to get this economy going again once we've got the pandemic under control. Trevin, what are you going to tell him?
I think one of the great things, or one of the silver linings of this pandemic, is that it's got a lot of Canadians working together, whether that's business, labor, and government, whether that's provincial and federal governments. And it's really important that we're able to build on that momentum. And I would say in focusing on reducing interprovincial trade barriers, if we're talking to the Premier and also talking to the federal government. This is something that people have been talking about for ages now. In terms of projections, you know, it seems like we can add about 4% to real per capita GDP if we're able to reduce our interprovincial trade barriers. Let's build on that momentum of provinces, federal governments working together.
Okay, the Premier says he's going to cut you off because he wants to make sure that he hears from everybody before the next meeting comes in. Okay, Armin, what bright idea have you got?
I think the big thing that Ontario can do with the backing of the federal government is actually start to pivot towards a cleaner, greener future and putting our industrial base to work to actually help us become a leader in how the world looks at energy production, utilization, and conservation. And I think Ontario should be the poster child for how we do this properly and provide examples for the rest of the world. In addition, of course, to early learning and childcare and making sure that we are adequately funding really high quality caring. The caring economy props up the essential economy. So let's make sure that we don't drop the ball on that, Premier.
That's two bright ideas. Okay. And the Premier, being the kind of guy he is, I suspect will let you get away with two ideas. Okay, Pamela Cross, let's hear your bright idea beyond what you've talked about on taxation.
I'm actually going to bring forward one more taxation pet peeve, which I think is something that would benefit if a change were made. There is a tax disincentive right now to passing a business from one generation to the next. It is better to sell your business to a third party than it is to keep it in the family. These rules have been in place for many years. This is not an option we want our Canadian businesses to have. We want them to be able to keep the businesses in Canada and to grow them here. So I would say, whatever we do, please get rid of those rules to make it an even playing field to keep businesses in Canada in the families that grew them.
Okay, Jim Stanford, you get the last piece of advice.
I'm going to cheat too, Steve. I got one big bright idea that includes a dozen other ideas. I think fighting the coronavirus is like fighting a war, really. And I think there's a strong historical analogy to what happened in World War II and after World War II. And I've argued for a post-COVID Marshall Plan, if you like, a multi-year plan involving, as Trevin says, the federal government, the provincial governments, the private sector, unions, other stakeholders, and say, look, this economy isn't going to snap back. We have to pull it back. We have to rebuild through a systematic, integrated plan to invest in public infrastructure, private investment, new technology, a green economy, the caring services that Armin talked about. And we did that after World War II, and we started with a debt of 150% of GDP, and it evaporated because we built an economy around it. And I I'm optimistic that we could do the same thing after COVID, after our war against COVID, but it takes a plan and determination to make it happen.
I want to thank you for offering such useful advice to our two first ministers and our two finance ministers. And I suspect rather than trying to set up meetings with all four of you, we'll just send them a tape of this and they can play it in their own sweet time. Jim Stanford, Trevin Stratton, Armin Yalnizyan, and Pamela Cross, good of all of you to join us on TVO tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
For many people, being inducted into the Canadian Music Hall of Fame would be a crowning achievement on a career well done. But not for Jann Arden. Instead, she is busier than ever. The 8-time Juno Award-winning singer-songwriter is also star of her own comedy series, hosts a lifestyle podcast, and has written an honest and fierce new memoir. It's called If I Knew Then, Finding Wisdom in Failure and Power in Aging. And we're delighted that it brings Jann Arden back to our airwaves tonight from Springbank, Alberta, just west of Calgary. It's so good to see you again.
Very good to be here, Steve. Thank you so much for having me.
Although the last time you were on this program, actually, it's funny, we talked about many of the same things we're going to talk about tonight. We talked about self-acceptance, we talked about aging, and so I know you've been thinking about this for a while, but you were in the studio, and I missed the fact that you're not here, but I'd like to walk down memory lane with you just a little bit, shall we? Here's a clip from the last time you were here. Roll it, Chilton.
So there is a sense of joy, and I feel like I'm getting older, so I'm not as hard on myself as I used to be, and age is the only thing that does that for you. You get older and you abandon the flightiness of youth, and you just start really enjoying life, and I think that's where I'm at right now,
You want to fess up to how old you are? I know.
43. I just turned 43 Easter Sunday.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm damn proud of it. Every line, scar, blemish, bruise, varicose vein. I love it. Bought and paid for, as my friend Leonard Parker would say.
Those are life's experiences, man.
Why would you want to lie about your age? I never really understood that. You've earned it. Thank God you're here.
We're going to play this tape back in 10 or 15 years, and you may change your mind by then.
I'm going to say, God, I look great. That's what I'll be saying.
Well, here we are 15 years later, and boy, you still look fantastic, I gotta say. Don't you think?
I remember really liking that version of me, and it's great to see. I had that was probably like not even quite halfway through my career yet, but I recognized my colleague Russell Broom, and Maury Lafoy was playing bass. Yeah, no, it is. It's great getting older, and I stand by every single word. It's a privilege for one thing. Even at my age, at 58, I've lost several friends over the years to various things, and it's always heartbreaking, but I am not one of those people who you will ever hear say, I wish I was younger, I wish I could go back. I have no desire to be young again. I'm looking forward to being older, and I hope I have that opportunity. It doesn't bother me at all. My mother was my greatest champion and my greatest teacher when it came to things like that. So I'm going to follow along right behind her. She was really such a marvel to me.
Well, you do say in the book you never really figured out life until you turned 50, and you were only 43 there. So what happened at 50 that somehow a light came on that wasn't on when you were 43 during that interview?
Well, I don't think it was any one particular thing that happened at 50. I think it's the accumulation of knowledge, of wisdom, of time, of experiences. You know, the human brain learns how to adapt and how to respond. The way you navigate a situation at 55 is much different than you navigate at 25. That's just time. But yeah, I keep telling younger people that I meet now, I'm like, listen, you're not even going to become a person until you turn 45. And they just look at me like, what? But it seems so simple when you say it, but it is absolutely the accumulation of time and experiences that let you go forward in a much more intrepid way, in a much more confident way, that you're not constantly having this conversation in your head that penalizes everything you do and every idea that you have. No, you can't do that. That'll never work. You've got to do this. Why do you think that you could possibly, accomplish that? That's the voice that I think the first 30 years of our lives, 35 years of our lives. Now I actually have someone in my head cheering me on all the time. Go, why not? Just do it. Oh, who cares if you fall off? So
although, can I take issue with something you say right at the very beginning of the book, which is you call yourself a crone. You say, now that I'm a crone. And, you know, when I think of a crone, Jann, I think of kind of a 90-year-old frail woman in a wheelchair or in a rocking chair, and that's not you.
Oh, I'm a crone. I'm definitely a crone. I am the woman crawling out of the trees with a big stick. You know, and if you're not beside me, get out of my way. Maybe it's the June version of the crone, but a crone is a lovely being. She's someone that doesn't need a lot of company in order to be happy. I think one thing that has really come to the forefront in my mind during all this COVID stuff is that I actually like myself a lot. And, you know, we've all been forced to spend time by ourselves and alone with our thoughts. And I write about that in this book as well, how important it is, even if you have 3 kids or 2 jobs, or, you know, you're driving kids around to hockey, whatever it is that you're doing that doesn't allow you to have time by yourself. Maybe COVID has presented each and every one of us with that opportunity of having an hour where you can hear yourself think. And, but like I was saying, I actually like myself. And that is the goal of a human life. I don't know why we are led to believe that we need to be in a state of constant opposition to who we are, how we think, and what we do. I like who I am. And that is big in human life. It lets you go forward in a way that you can't if you don't like yourself.
Well, I think that answer reflects a couple of things. Number one, I appreciate you're making in the book the distinction between being alone and being lonely. They are different things. And certainly, you know, you've expressed the importance of having time to oneself. But the thing that also comes out, and you've had, I mean, you've been very open and blunt about it. You've had a hell of a life with a lot of challenges and a lot of difficulties, and we'll talk about some of them here. But your optimism that just insists on powering through. And let's just start by going back. You spent a lot of time alone as a kid of, I don't know what you were, I mean, early teenage years, maybe even before, in the basement of your home alone, and you didn't mind it because you were hiding from your dad's alcoholism. And as it turns out, that's what introduced you to a guitar and songwriting, and you'd written 300 songs by the time you were, you know, whatever, a teenager. How do you find that optimistic path when it would be so easy to go the other way?
Well, I believe good things come out of bad things. Absolutely. You know, good things come out of bad things. My dad's alcoholism sent my life in a direction that would have been unreasonable to me at 10 or 11 or 12 years old. And let me just add a caveat to what you said about 300 songs. They were perhaps the worst 300 songs that the world had ever heard and will never hear. You know, I was certainly on a trajectory to learning how to compose songs and put them together, and I had terrible lyrics, terrible melodies. They were terrible. Once in a while, maybe I had like 3 that were like, ooh, these kind of make sense. But anyway, it was not the work of a genius by any stretch of the imagination. But I was trying to stay away from my dad, who was very unpredictable. We had our record player down there. We had all these Columbia House records. We were members of the Columbia House Record Club. I highly recommend it. But, you know, we were in a rural area, and I remember we got 2 TV stations. I'm really dating myself now, 2 TV stations. We had like a couple of radio stations. But something happened to me that would never have happened had it not been for Dad's alcoholism. There's no other way for me to explain it.
Well, I'll take you a little bit further forward because, and I'd love it if you'd tell this story, if Alan and Jill had not broken up, you might not be the superstar you are today. Explain.
Good things come out of bad things. I had been working with a fellow in Calgary named Neil McGonigal for several years, probably 5 years, living in a basement suite, composing songs, making demos, sending them out, constant. At the end of 5 years, it was, we were running out of money, running out of ideas, running out of labels. Last cassette went out to a young fella named Alan Reed. He was 26 years old, looking to sign the next Nirvana. It was the early 90s. Anyway, he put my cassette in his car and listened to it a little bit. Girls singing love songs with an acoustic guitar wasn't really his bag. And he passed. And a couple of days later, his girlfriend, fiance, Jill Schnell, I still see her around, broke up with him. And he was devastated and took a bit of time off, composed himself, went back to work. Excuse me. And guess whose cassette was still in his car? So here's a young man, 26, going through his first heartbreak, gets in his car, turns it on, and the first song that came on was a song called I Just Don't Love You Anymore, which did end up being on my first record. And he pulled his car over because there was no cell phones in those days. And he signed me to a record deal. He said, I don't know if we're ever going to sell a record, but let's do it. He says, I think I understand what it is that you do.
I wonder if, I've always wanted to ask you this question. Given that that's how you were discovered and how it all eventually happened, do you ever wonder whether if those two hadn't broken up, that story that you just told never would have happened? Maybe you would not have been discovered. Maybe you would not have had the career you've had, or was your talent so obviously there and your drive so obviously there that it wouldn't have happened that way, but it would have happened another way? What do you think?
I don't know, Steve. I don't know if I believe that. I don't know if I believe that the outcome would have been me pursuing music. I don't know if I would have be the person sitting here talking to you. I just don't know how to answer that. I think what is known compared to what is unknown in this life, in this space that we occupy in the abyss, is so beyond anything I could ever imagine. All I know is I believe in goodness. I believe in intention. I believe that thoughts are things and that you can really change and shape your life by how you perceive yourself in the world and how you think of yourself. And it is a constant battle. I talk about it in the book. I talk about, let's face it, the longest conversation you're going to have with anyone in your life is you. And we have some pretty derogatory, pretty horrible conversations with ourselves. And I think when that young lady you spoke to at 43 years old in that clip that you showed, I think she was just starting to actually believe her own crap and to believe that things were possible for me and that I was deserving of succeeding. It's glaringly obvious that most people deal much better with failure than they do success. When people fail, they expect it. I think there's been lots of studies done on that too. When they don't get a job, or they don't win the lottery, or they don't win a race, or when they fail, they're like, of course. I've already told myself this a billion times. I knew that. I knew I wasn't going to get it. So I don't know why we don't feel like we can't turn that conversation around. My mom used to say to me as a young person, as a teenager, one thing she said to me, she goes, Jann, I hope you aspire to something more than just getting married. That really stuck with me because a lot of little girls are said, that's the end all be all. That's what you should be. That should be the goal. That should be what you're firing the gun at, is marriage. And my mom was no. And I think it's because she looked at her own life and went, I hope you want more than this. And it was heartbreaking and pivotal for me at the same time. But she also said to me in my 20s when I was starting to do music, why not you? Why not you? And because I had a mom that championed me and accepted me and cheered me on despite a massive thing in the world telling me that I couldn't do it, that I shouldn't be able to. I was because I had her voice ringing in my head when I didn't have my own. So that was a big part of my story and continues to be. My mom informs my life and my decisions every single day, and she's been gone a couple of years now.
I think that's her picture over your left shoulder, is it not?
That's me in the back of a book, but I think my mom is here. Here's my mom.
There we go. Well,
Yeah.
those two quotes you gave of your mother's are great, but there was a third one that I wrote down because I thought it was very compelling as well, and that one was, if you can't be brave, be reckless. Now, are those are not the words I would have thought that would come out of the mouth of a mom in rural Alberta in the 1960s or 70s. What did you infer from those?
Well, I think my mom had stolen that from my Aunt Ern, my great Aunt Ern. So it was my mother's aunt, and she was about 4'0". And my Aunt Ern was a person that would jump off a bridge or drive a car through a fire. And I think she had a lot of influence on my mom. And to me, that always just meant, just do it. Just worry about it's easier to beg forgiveness than ask for permission. I think that's kind of what I gleaned from that. And sometimes, recklessness is the absence of bravery. But I feel like they work in tandem. I really do, Steve. Sometimes a reckless conjures up, someone not caring and not being aware of the lives that are affecting around them. But I think you can be insulated and still be reckless and not, hurt other people. But that was my mom. I didn't always understand everything she said to me, that's for sure.
I want to put one of your dad's quotes to you as well, because he had something that I jotted down here as well. He said, the worst marriages don't end in divorce. They don't end.
Don't end.
which is a pretty, it's a pretty out there thing for somebody who was married for 60 years to be saying, right? So what did you infer from that?
I think the fact that people feel martyred, I think sometimes in marriages, maybe my parents were cut from a cloth where you stay together no matter what. And my mom said, well, we just felt like we had more together than we did apart, and neither of us wanted to start over again. But she did kick him out at one point. I think 15, 20 years into their marriage, she booted him out of the house, and because of his drinking, obviously. But my dad, as much as he joked, a lot of the time there was a lot of truth in his very bizarre sense of humor. He used to always tell me, first the man, he takes the drink, then the drink, he takes the man. And that always stuck with me too, in a haunting kind of a way. It stole so much of his life. Even when he quit drinking, he resented it so much that he was kind of a miserable guy. My friend Stephanie called him the goddamn-it guy.
But your mother would only call him the GD guy because she never swore, right?
She didn't swear until she got Alzheimer's, and then she said things that I never ever thought I'd hear coming out of her mouth. But my God, did we laugh.
Well, let me get back on the drugs and alcohol issue, because, and I can't remember who said this. It might have been your dad. You might have heard it from someone else. People who abuse drugs and alcohol are practicing how to die. That must have hit you hard, eh?
It did. And I never wanted to be like my dad. I figured if I didn't drink rum, that I would never be like him. That's what he drank all the time, and he always smelled of rum. If rum was the last thing in a minibar, I wouldn't drink it, even if I was desperate, if that tells you anything. I think any kid that witnesses an alcoholic parent and the unilateral damage that drinking does in a family, I just feel for them so much. I regret so many of the things that I did in my life. I just always thought that I had control of alcohol and that it wasn't a problem. And it was because I didn't drink like my dad that I thought I was okay. I was kind of a binger. I wasn't one of those people that woke up and started drinking in the morning. So I thought, I can't be an alcoholic if I'm not like that. Because my dad drank every day, all day. When I did drink, which was, maybe a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday night, I sort of wasted myself. But then I would wouldn't drink for 4 days. And I thought, see, I don't have a problem. I'm fine. And that's just not how alcohol works. I always say to people that ask me about stopping drinking, and I get asked all the time, how did you stop? That's always a telling question to me if they're coming to me and asking me that. My answer to them is always, if you have looked in a mirror at any time in your life, recently, not so recently, and if you've said to yourself, in that moment, with you, your toothbrush, and the mirror, and you've said, you're drinking too much. You're drinking too much, Jann. I said that to myself so many times over the years. Don't give up trying. Don't give up trying to stop, because that voice gets quieter and quieter and quieter as you progress in a disease like alcoholism. Any kind of addiction, that voice gets quieter. But I got lucky. I just had the sense to stop doing it, and I'm very grateful.
Well, it was one of the things that surprised me about the book, because I know Frank Sinatra sang regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. And you, on the other hand, say that you have lived a life riddled with regrets, which I was surprised with your use of that word. The getting into booze, I get why you'd regret that, but riddled suggests far more than that. Or am I reading too much into it?
No, I have so many regrets. I've always wondered how people can say that I don't regret anything. I do. I regret a lot of things. Having said that, and this seems odd in the same breath, I wouldn't change them. I wouldn't change, the failure and the mistakes that I made and the people I've hurt, the things I've said, the actions that I've done out of spite. I wouldn't change them because, like I said, I like who I am, and I didn't always like who I was. I had moments of kind of seeing somebody that I liked. But regret is, maybe it's just a word we throw around too much. It's just become we've come kind of desensitized to what a regret is. And it's something that you wish you hadn't have done. I've got lots of those.
I want to ask you the same kind of question I once asked Tony Bennett, which was, do you ever get sick of singing San Francisco? It's his signature song. Every time he does a concert, everybody expects him to sing I Left My Heart in San Francisco, and if he doesn't sing it, well, he wouldn't think of not singing it because he knows everybody wants it. And I want to ask you the same kind of question. You really can't do a concert or a show and not sing Insensitive, right?
I would never think of it. I would never not sing Insensitive. The house I'm sitting in is because of Insensitive. It all stems from that. I mean, it's one of the few outside songs that I've ever cut on an original album. And it is a brilliant song. Anne Laurie, who wrote that song, fellow Calgarian girl, is a brilliant writer. I wish that I had seen her had other cuts with her fantastic writing. But no, I would never not sing that. It would be like not singing Good Mother, or not singing I Would Die For You, or not singing Could I Be Your Girl, or Unloved. Those are songs that are in my set, and they always will be.
Well, that's what Tony Bennett said, or I guess I asked him, don't you ever get sick? Is there never one moment where you're in the middle of that song and you think, geez, I've just sung this one time too many? And he said, no, it's a fabulous song, and I never get tired of singing it. Are you the same way with Insensitive?
Yeah, I don't get sick of them. No. I think it's such a blessing that, that I even have a catalog of songs. I mean, these days, young artists are coming up and they have a single, and it's very hard to make a career on one song. You kind of have to have a few. But I enjoy it. And every time I sing it, it's slightly different. It's never the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was the same. Well, how do you cool your lips after a summer's kiss? I've always wanted to know the answer to that. Okay, we'll save that for the next interview. Sadly, I'm down to my last minute here, and I want to ask you one more very weird, quirky question, and that is, I think I remember hearing that once upon a time, rather than pay you $30,000 for a gig that you did, some chocolate company gave you $30,000 worth of chocolate. And I want to know if there's any of that chocolate left.
I just got rid of the last gift certificate probably about 5 years ago. So everyone had, my mom would say to me, I wouldn't mind another one of those chocolate gift cards. And I gave them to charity. It is friggin' hard to buy $30,000 worth of chocolate. You know, some people would go, no, it's so easy. It's not. It is. I would take kids, this is my Willy Wonka moment. I would take kids, my friends' kids, nephews. I'd be like, we'd go into the chocolate store and I'd like, pick whatever you want. Take whatever you want. They're like, what? I'm like, seriously, grab whatever you want. And you'd think that these kids would go hell-bent for leather, don't even know what that saying means, but take everything off the shelves and put it in a bag. They'd take like 1, 2 things. Is this okay? I'm like, what is wrong with kids these days? Take some GD chocolate. Like, take that. They just did not have it in them. And God, if that had been me at 12 years old, I would have been Pippi Longstocking it big time. Like.
Well, I like the way you said GD there, just like your mother would have recommended, so that's nice. I want to just remind everybody, If I Knew Then, Wisdom in Failure and Power in Aging. That is Jann Arden's latest. Her TV show is coming back as well on CTV. She's got a sitcom about her life. And oh my goodness, I don't know if you know this, 5.6 million hits on YouTube for Insensitive. 5.6 million. No kidding, it paid for the house. Jann, I hope we'll do this again in 15 years, or maybe even sooner. What the heck?
Thank you so much, Stephen. I can't wait to see us 10 years from now.
Amen to that. Take care. And that is the agenda for Monday, October 26th, 2020. Canadians live and work all over the world. Tomorrow, we'll hear the case for why Canada should make better use of that overseas resource. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.